Hello everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Gaming in the Wild, a video games podcast about games from the interesting artistic side of the tracks, from indie to AAA. My name's John, I'm your host. I'm speaking to you from Reykjavik, Iceland, as usual, where it is cold, it is dark, it's game playing season officially, and I've been dipping into quite a few different games, looking for my main game. I'm going to talk about a few of them today. It's one of those roundup episodes where I'm going to talk through 4 different games that I've played, 3-4 games, one a demo. I'm going to talk about Birth by Madison Carr. This is a game that's currently available in the Steam Next Fest as a demo. I'm going to talk about Tunic. I had another swing at that game since it landed on Switch as I bounced on it when it first came out in Xbox, and I wanted to give it another chance. I'm going to talk about Hindsight, and a little interesting artistic indie game that popped out on Annapurna Interactive earlier this year. And I'm going to finish up with a review of Dorfromantik. This is a lovely little village building, tile setting strategy game with nice warm ambient music. It's been out on PC for a while, but it came out on Switch just this week. And it seems that a lot of people are playing it from what I'm seeing on Twitter and what people are saying in the show's Discord. So I'm going to talk about Dorfromantik as well. So we've got a packed slate for this show. Looking forward to talking about all of those games. But seeing as it's the start of the month, I thought I would begin by looking at a couple of the games that are coming up this month. There are quite a few interesting things coming out. It seems like both Switch and Game Pass are having a big month. First of all, Nier Automata, a game that I covered earlier this year. A bit of an overground cult classic, you could say. A lot of people have played this game. It's sold very well, and we're expecting more in the Nier series from Yoko Taro. And there is a full episode on this game if you would like to hear it. I reviewed it just a few months ago. But it's out on Switch now, and it's running natively, which is always great for the Switch when a game comes from more powerful consoles, and from what people are saying, it's actually running very well. So if you are one of those players who only plays a Switch or uses Switch as your primary console, and you've never played Nier Automata, it's out, it's a firm recommend from me, and it sounds like a good port. Another favourite of this show is coming out on Switch. In fact, it's out today as I'm recording this, and that's No Man's Sky, a game that I was obsessed with and have over 100 hours in. That is also running natively on the Switch somehow, in single player, and from what people are saying, it's running pretty well. So No Man's Sky is now on the Switch. It's a full-priced game. I think Nier is at £40, but I think that No Man's Sky is at the full 60. But that's on Switch now if you want that on the go. And then the next 5 games that I've got on this list are all Game Pass. They're all in the middle of the month, and Game Pass is going hard this month. They have Scorn coming out. This is an HR Giga-inspired, fleshy horror game that looks pretty interesting, and some people have been talking about it on YouTube who've gone hands-on with it and really like what they have seen. So if you're a horror game fan, or if you're looking for a Halloween game, then Scorn is coming to Game Pass on the 14th. On the 18th, we have A Plague Tale Requiem. The first Plague Tale, A Plague Tale Innocence, is a game that I have reviewed on this show, and I had some notes for it. There were a few bits of stodgy gameplay, but it was certainly a wonderful looking game that told a really interesting story. So I'll be looking at Plague Tale Requiem when that comes out for sure. And then one of the best games that I've played this year is finally coming out on console, and that's Norco. This is a brilliant point and click adventure with pixel graphics that tells a fantastic story set in the near future, but it might as well be now. It's a kind of dystopian contemporary. It's about a particular area of Louisiana in the States. The petrochemical industry is heavy there, and it's about what that does to people's lives. Absolutely fantastic game. Reviewed it earlier this year. I do recommend that you check that game out. Check out that episode if you haven't. That's coming to Game Pass on Xbox on the 20th. And there are a couple more here. Persona 5 Royal is coming to Game Pass on the 21st. I've never really clicked with the Persona series, but maybe I'll give it another try. I have tried Persona 5 on the PlayStation, but people say the Royal version is the way to play. And then there's an interesting looking one. I'm not sure if this is going to be my cup of tea exactly, but there's a game called High on Life that I'm going to check out. It's on Game Pass, so you might as well. That's on the 25th. It's a biopunk first-person shooter developed with the creators of Rick and Morty. And in this one, you have a gun, the pommel of which talks to you. So as you are shooting in this first-person shooter game, the back of your gun has got a little face and it's talking you through and quipping along the way. I've got a feeling this might be like a hit or miss, depending on how you click with the humour, but I will certainly be giving it a look. That's High on Life. And then there's 2 Switch games to round out the month. There's an interesting looking hand-drawn indie game called A Winding Path coming to Switch on October the 27th. It's very pretty. It's got this line-drawn style, monochrome graphics, and it looks like you just take a walk and go on an adventure in this hand-drawn fairy tale world. So I'll be checking that one out for sure. And then the month is rounded out with the arrival of Bayonetta 3 as a Switch exclusive, interestingly, and that's coming on October 28th. I'm currently still, I think I'm at the last boss of Bayonetta 1, and I kind of fell off it. I was having some trouble with that boss, but I do still want to power through the end of Bayonetta. It's a really interesting character that they've created there and a really interesting world. There's nothing quite like it out there. So I'm interested for Bayonetta 3. There was also a little bit of release news in that Sable, one of the games of the year of this podcast last year, a wonderful game, a dreamy exploration game, is coming to PS5. I know that a lot of people who don't have Xboxes have been dying to get their hands on Sable. And from what we've been told, it's coming out at the end of 2022. So by the end of the year, Sable will be on PlayStation, and people that don't have a PC or Xbox in their gaming setup will be able to play it on the PlayStation. I'm wondering if it's going to come onto the PlayStation Plus service or if it's just going to come out to buy. But either way, it's very exciting that Sable will be finding a new audience and getting another chance, especially because it was a game that needed some quite hefty patches when it first came out. And so the people that play it on PlayStation will hopefully be getting all the benefit of the various patches that have been done. It was in pretty rough shape when I played it upon release on Xbox, and so I could be tempted to give it another try and just see how far the game has come since then. But other than that, it's currently the Steam Next Fest, and a few people in the show's Discord have been getting their Steam Decks right about now. We've got 2 people in the Discord who've got a Steam Deck in their hands, and a couple more that have them on the way, I believe. And it seems like the arrival of the Steam Deck is really taking console gamers and giving them a way into Steam, making them more excited about games that are only on Steam. And Steam is a great place for indie games. You know, a lot of games are only on PC and Mac, or even only on PC. And a lot of these really good indie games just never get over to console. You know, it's only a certain few that are ported over and have that wider exposure. So Steam Next Fest and the arrival of the Steam Deck is really interesting, actually. It seems like a lot of people are going to be dipping into that Steam library. And the fact that Next Fest has come along at the same time must just be a dream come true for anyone who has just gotten a shiny new Steam Deck, because there are loads of games to try. A couple of games that are on my to playlist both got demos. One of them is Season, A Letter to the Future. And I saw this one on one of the showcases in the summer, and it really caught my eye. It's a game about recording sound, taking photographs. It's a 3D exploration game where you're documenting a change of season. But I believe in the mythology of this game, that's actually a big change, a big ecological change. And so the game is a lot about climate and memory and things like that. And you also cycle in this game. There was some beautiful footage in the trailer of someone cycling through the forest. The protagonist is very cool looking as well. I was quite looking forward to playing this one, but as you may know if you listen to the show regularly, I only run a Mac. I don't have a Windows machine, but I do have Windows set up on a partition drive on my Mac. And so very occasionally I will try and play a Windows game with mixed results. Sometimes it works great, like Inscription, for example, played the whole thing on the Mac, even though it was running on Windows at the time. It has since had a Mac port. But sometimes it doesn't work so well, especially because the M1 Mac is not a games machine, and Season did not run well on it at all. It was very, very chuggy, but I'm running it in a kind of slightly odd environment, so that's no wonder. I didn't get to play Season, but I am still absolutely stoked to play it when it finally comes out, and I think I'll be playing it on my PS5. But one game that I did get to try at Next Fest is a game called Birth by Madison Carr. This one came onto my radar at the Day of the Devs presentation. It was a very interesting looking line-drawn point-and-click puzzle game, kind of, but that doesn't really do it justice. There's much more to it. This game is going to come out on Windows and Mac January of next year. So I guess most people can play it. If you've got a laptop, then you can play it pretty much. And it's got a very specific atmosphere, this one. All of the colours are like very desaturated and dry. It's all sort of paper and bone. And there are line-drawn creatures that have skulls for heads, like animal skulls and horns. There is a desolate city that you live in as the protagonist of this game. And it's the kind of game where if you want to go outside of the room that you are in, it's kind of first person, I guess. You click on that door, the scene will change. You'll be in the street looking at the houses straight on in this line-drawn style. And then if you click on a door, click on the door of a bakery, then you'll go inside there. Maybe there's someone there to talk to, or maybe there's a puzzle that you have to do to get something. Because what you're trying to do in this game is to assemble a friend, assemble a companion. And in order to do so, you've decided to collect a skeleton, you've decided to collect some organs, and you've decided to assemble them yourself. So you've got someone to keep you company in this lonely city. It's a very dark and very bleak and very interesting premise. The art style is absolutely beautiful. The music is simple and compelling as well. The whole thing has just got this lovely feel about it. It feels very considered and very heartfelt. It's delicate, it's melancholy, it's macabre, but it's also quite light and humane and humorous in a different way. So there's a lot going on in this game. It's just a very interesting package. It was really fun to play the demo. There's some interesting puzzles in this one. So, for example, if you go into a stranger's apartment and you see there's someone in the bed with the covers pulled up over the head, and there's like a skeletal hand coming out from under the duvet. And if you look around the apartment, you can see certain things that you can interact with. For example, there is a fish tank with some shadows of fishes, and there's like a safe or something, or like a box puzzle. And so you have to carry out these small puzzles. They're not too challenging. They're pretty easygoing. And so you just kind of waft through these light puzzles doing interesting things like unwrapping some desiccated flowers, and maybe one of the fish is mixed in with the flowers. And so you find all of these dried out fish and put them into the fish tank, and then you get the object that you need. A little safe will open and you get a little bone. And so in your backpack you can see all of the bones that you have, and the whole game is you trying to assemble this friend. It's just such an interesting world, very, very compelling stuff. There is something really special here. There's a little lightness of touch to it and a really strong vision to it. So that was a really fun demo to play. That game is available on Steam now as a demo. If you have a Steam account, if you've got a new Steam Deck, or if you just run Steam on your Mac or PC sometimes, I suggest giving Birth a try. And if you like it, then wishlist it, and the game's out in January. You'll be hearing about it again on this show. And before we get onto the review portion of the show, and I'll be talking about Tunic and Hindsight and Dorfromantik, please do let me mention that this is a patron-supported show. I have a bunch of lovely patrons who give me $1 or $3 or $5 a month to help fund the show, to help upgrade equipment, to help buy music and games to cover and that sort of thing, cover all of the expenses, the domain name and the URL. So all of that money goes straight back into the show. I just want to make it kind of cost neutral, really. So if you enjoy this podcast, then you can join up at patreon.com/gaminginthewild. You'll get an invitation to our lovely Discord community where we talk about games every day. I talk about games I'm going to be covering. People talk about what they're playing. We share screenshots. We share sale tips. You also get some extra episodes. There are 8 extra episodes so far, and I add to that every few months. So that's patreon.com/gaminginthewild if you would like to support this podcast. Thank you very much to all my existing patrons. I really do appreciate it, and thank you to you if that's something that you would like to do. So we've got 3 games to talk about in the back half of the show here. So let's get into it. And the first among them is Tunic. So Tunic came out in March of this year. It was on the Xbox at the time, and it was a console exclusive that came out on Game Pass. It's made by a solo developer, although he did gather a team around him to finish it off, called Andrew Shouldice, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, and Tunic Team, which is the team that he assembled. It's published by Finji. It's got an absolutely lovely soundtrack by Lifeformed, and it's a very cozy looking game, a Zelda-influenced isometric action-adventure in which you play as a little fox in a green tunic with this little sword and shield, very much like Link. It has a very lovely, soft, marshmallowy, flumpy kind of graphical style. If you hit bushes, for example, they pop off like little sponges. The whole thing is all spongy and soft-edged. And it has this lovely, soothing ambient soundtrack. The light is also very nice in this game. Lots of pink sunshine, long shadows, flickering fire, and that kind of thing. It uses light very well. I tried it when it came out on Game Pass. It was one of my most anticipated games of this year, and I bounced on it. I tried it a couple times. I found it a little difficult. I found the difficulty options a little intense. There were two options. There was like difficult or not difficult, and I found them to be basically either way too hard or way too easy. The easy mode is like a god mode, and the other mode is just very, very difficult. So I bounced on the game, but it came out on Switch this week, I believe, and they launched a new difficulty mode with that Switch release, which they call reduced difficulty, but I'm choosing to think of it as the normal mode that was missing at launch. And I'm happy to say that I had a better time with it this time. I got further than I did last time I played it. The grunt combat is much more manageable, and I think it just basically ramps down the damage that you take, and that's it. So you can just take a few more hits, and I was much more able to get between the restart points. So it's basically a kind of an adventure game where you run around, you take out baddies on the way, and it's packed with secrets. Around every corner there can be a secret. It uses a lot of perspective trickery, so sometimes you'll take a shortcut back from an area that you've just finished and find yourself popping out of a bush or from around a corner in an area that you've been to already. So it has this nice circular system going on where you'll go to do something and then you'll find your way back and you'll come out from behind a waterfall and you'll be like, oh, I didn't realize there was a door there. So the whole world feels like it's packed with secrets, and it's quite lovely in that respect, I think. The way that it uses perspective and the level design is really interesting and good. So I was feeling pretty optimistic about my third attempt to get into this game. I was really trying to give it an extra chance, because it's just so charming. But I eventually just ran into some of the problems that made me bounce the first couple times that I played it. And I think I might be in the minority here. This game did quite well critically. It's on an 85 on Metacritic. It's been mentioned in some people's Game of the Year conversations that are starting to tick away now that we're in the final quarter of the year. But I did bounce on this one for a third time. And there's a few things that kind of don't work for me in this game. It's a game that uses a cipher language, a little bit like Fez or like Hyper Light Drifter, other wordless games pretty much. And in this game, it's implemented in a way that I found to be a little frustrating. Like you'll often find signs. If you try and read the sign, you'll just see a bunch of characters, kind of made-up characters made out of triangles and shapes. You can't read them, and as I understand it, you don't really get to decode that language. And I found this, like, straight off the bat to be a little frustrating. To look at a sign and to just get illegible text seemed to me to be just a real choice. Like, I moved on from these signs none the wiser about what they said, and it made me wonder why they were there at all. But the real bugbear I have with this game, I think, is in the combat, and I think it's specifically in a Dark Souls influence, which was really unexpected for me in this game. I was expecting like a very Zelda cozy experience, because that's what this game seems to be. Like it's all about this cute world and this lovely vibe that it creates and this ambient music. But it turns out that it's just a very hard game. It's got dodge roll combat, sort of strike and roll. It's got an endurance meter. It's got campfires where baddies will reset. It has corpse runs when you die. The dodge roll in this game seems to not have that many iframes. So when I was trying to dodge, I would often be hit and feel frustrated, like I had done the right thing, but still been punished. In this playthrough, I did get through to the first boss of the game. That's probably like an hour of play or something. I was having a pretty good time, but that boss just absolutely mashed me. And I had this feeling that the controls of the game feel a little flumpy, a little imprecise and jelly-ish. And it seems to be demanding precision gameplay to some degree, like you have to dodge blows very precisely with this ungenerous dodge roll. And I just got mashed like 5-6 times in a row, even on this reduced difficulty by that first boss, and just kind of threw the towel in again. I found it very frustrating. And I think that this one joins the list of games that have an unwanted Dark Souls influence. Like a lot of games seem to draw from Dark Souls, and it seems to make the game worse. I think the other kind of top offender for me in this respect is Jedi Fallen Order, the Star Wars game, which kind of nonsensically draws on Dark Souls. And Tunic is another game to me that seems to have been made worse by a Dark Souls influence. And this was a game that was a long time in development, and apparently it was at trade shows for a long time before it actually released. And people who played it back then said it was more of a Zelda-like experience at first, but somewhere along the way this Dark Souls thing has crept in. And for me, it was just not a good decision for this game. It made me think about what they did with Death's Door. Death's Door is another isometric, cute game with dodge rolls and strikes and all of that kind of stuff. But in Death's Door, it really worked. The roll felt snappy. I always felt fully in control of the crow that I was controlling in Death's Door. And even though it was at times difficult, it always felt manageable and it always felt fair. So if I died, it was my fault. In Tunic, I often felt like the controls had kind of done for me, really. And so I didn't like this game, I'm sad to say. I know there were a lot of fans out there, so I'm sorry for the negative review of this one if you happen to be a fan of the game. I really, really wanted to like this game. I gave it 3 chances, but all of them ended with me deleting it in rage quit frustration, which is just so funny when it's just this cute game about a little fox. I do think that if it had leaned more into the Zelda influence, more into the level design, and eased off on the gas a little bit when it comes to the combat, then this could have been something really special. And I know that for a lot of people it is something special, and it does have a very retro video game feel to it, like in the manual. So there are these pages that you find as you're running around the world that slowly assemble into a manual that teach you things about how to play the game, that tell you secrets that you didn't know before, and that allow you to see the world in a slightly different way. So some people have been really fond of this one, and I find myself feeling jealous of people that have been able to get into it, because it really is a cool looking thing and a very charming game in many respects. But alas, it's not for me. Tunic is a bit of a miss for me. So let's move on to the next game that I'm going to talk about. This one is another 2022 game called Hindsight. So Hindsight is by Joel McDonald, another solo developer, who is actually the maker of Prune, a lovely mobile game that I reviewed on this show. A very relaxing mobile game on iOS. It's on Apple Arcade. It's where you swipe the branches off of trees with your finger, and then the tree responds and grows in another direction, and you have to grow towards the light through obstacles. It's very cool piece of design, and perfect as a mobile game. But Hindsight is a different proposition. It was published by Annapurna Interactive, and it's their second sort of game art experience about a difficult mother-daughter relationship that's come out this year after A Memoir Blue, a game that I reviewed earlier this year. Hindsight has 70 on Metacritic on the Switch, including a 90 from Nintendo Life and down to a 40 from Destructoid. It's a short game. How Long to Beat places it at 1.5 hours. And the developers describe it like this. What if the physical objects of everyday life, the possessions we hold close, were actual windows to the past, peer into distant memories and unforeseen futures in hindsight? And my take on this one is that it's a trip through the history of a fraught mother-daughter relationship with an ingenious central mechanic that lets you leaf through memories in a highly personal story that veers between melancholic and maudlin. So this one is the story of an estranged daughter who has become a successful restaurateur, and she's returning back to her childhood home to pack up the things after her mum's death. And so she's revisiting her childhood. The story is told through flashbacks from throughout her life that are triggered by objects that she finds. And these flashbacks are often voice acted, so you'll be living through the memories that she has of like being a little girl on the beach, piano lessons, playing a concert, problems at school, moving house, kind of commonplace childhood experiences, but told here through a filter of this being a sad childhood with a mother who was very demanding of her. And we learn the story as we go through the game of how she ended up being estranged from her mom and the regrets that she has about that. So it's some pretty heavy subject matter, but the way that you explore these memories is quite interesting. It's a rotation mechanic that uses something that I have dubbed as magic windows. And the way that this works is that an object will trigger the start of a chapter, and then you'll click on that chapter to fly through it into the past. It intersperses with scenes of you packing up the items at the house, and then you'll have to rotate the screen. So you rotate the camera around the protagonist of this game, and let's say that she is holding a photograph or something like that. And as you're rotating the camera, you might notice that if you look at that photograph, it looks like it's actually not a photograph that exists in this world, but it's actually a window, and through it you can see a little glimpse of another scene. If you then click on that photograph, you will fly into it and find yourself in the past. And you move through scenes in this way by rotating the camera, by identifying an object that looks different to the others, and by clicking on that object, you will pass through it. And this is quite an interesting effect. It really is like memories flooding back. It does a very good job of summoning up the feeling of remembrance and the jumbled ways that memories work. I also really like how it touches on objects as a trigger for memories, like records will send you back to a scene where the young protagonist is dancing with her dad, and you can hear the music and you can hear the laughter. Or drinking glasses will snap you back into a scene where the parents were arguing or something like that, or a kettle might snap you back into a scene where, as a child, the protagonist was shouted at for, doing something dangerous in relation to hot water that she shouldn't be doing, like touching a pan on her tiptoes or something like that. And it does have a very dreamy kind of mood of reverie that it's very effective in summoning, I think. And at the end of each chapter, you'll have to pick one of the key objects that triggered a memory and put it into your case. You'll return back to your modern day apartment, and you'll see that those objects are starting to populate the house. And so what you're doing really is choosing which objects to keep. And in a really interesting way, I think, by doing that, you're kind of choosing how to remember the past. You're choosing which memories you find valuable, which memories you're choosing to hold on to, and which memories you're choosing to let go. So I know that a lot of people play games to not think about the big questions of life, but I'm not averse to games that do touch on them and do work with them. I would say that if you do play this game, be ready for some sadness, and it has a lingering melancholic vibe, and it has a very real-world feeling of depression and difficulty and death and memory and all of these kind of things. So it's a pretty serious game. But I did say in my little intro there that it veers between the melancholic and the maudlin. And I do think that at times some of the memories that are lived through in this game stop feeling like significant moments from life and start to feel like almost awkward, almost like reading the pages of someone's diary. I got this feeling sometimes that I shouldn't be seeing what I'm seeing somehow. It was like someone was sharing moments that were very personal to them in a way that did not feel enriching to me in a strange way. So I would say this is a very highly personal project, and someone has made themselves very vulnerable to put down this story in this way. But there were definitely moments where I felt like it could have done, from an outside editorial perspective of someone that has not lived this story and is experiencing it as art. There were definitely moments where I felt like if I were the editor of this, I would probably have done like a firm edit on this story and deciding which memories were in service of the overall aims of this artwork and which memories were perhaps best kept in the diary, if you know what I mean. So it was a strange feeling of being almost guilty for playing this game, like being somewhere that I shouldn't be. I would also say that a big criticism of this game that I have is that despite the magic of the rotation mechanic, sometimes, especially on a Switch screen, they were just a little too small. Like I would be rotating a screen a lot, looking for what I should click on next. I played this using the touch screen, and it does seem like a game that would be great on, for example, an iPad, but even on the Switch OLED screen, which is quite big and quite bright, and I would sometimes just miss the object that I was supposed to be touching. There is a system in this game where if the character is looking in a certain direction, that's usually a pointer that you should also look in that direction. But there are also scenes where that doesn't work. For example, there's a screen where the girl is being dragged towards a car, and she is reaching back. She doesn't want to leave. And so I looked back where she was reaching, thinking that's where I should be looking. And I ended up rotating again and again and again, and I could not find where I was supposed to touch. I ended up literally going onto a YouTube video because I just couldn't see it, and I was just rotating and rotating and rotating. It turned out it was the rear view mirror in the car, which was pretty far away in shot, and so it was just this little speck on the screen that is really not visible to my eye. So sometimes that central mechanic became a little obscure, and I ended up spinning the same scene repeatedly, just kind of prodding at the screen, prodding everything I could see to try and progress. That became a little frustrating, and it broke the flow of the story. This is definitely the kind of thing that should be played in one sitting, I would say, as a 1.5 hour game. But I had to put it down a few times and walk away from it and come back later. So there is a bit of a problem in that mechanic. I don't know if it is designed with a large monitor in mind, if it's a PC game, or a large iPad maybe if it's supposed to be a touchscreen game. But on the Switch, that was a little bit of a frustrating flaw. But other than that, I do think that this, as a small 1.5 hour game, does offer something quite interesting. If that thematic material and that mechanic sound interesting to you, then you might get something out of this game. That's Hindsight. And that leads me on to the final game of this episode, a really fun little game that I've been playing. A lot of people have been playing this one as it came out on Switch, and it's called Dorfromantik. So Dorfromantik is a game by Tucana Interactive. It came out in April this year on PC, and it came out on September 29th on Switch. It's been broadly well received, with an 80 on Metacritic on PC, 81 on Switch. How Long to Beat has it at 13 through 70 hours. I don't know how one would complete this game, actually. I guess there are certain types of rewards that you can get to unlock new tiles, which I'll go into a little bit. Maybe when you complete all those rewards, you get credits or something. So maybe it is a completable game, even if it doesn't feel like one right now. The developers describe it like this. Dorfromantik is a peaceful building strategy and puzzle game where you create a beautiful, ever-growing village landscape by placing tiles, explore a variety of colourful biomes, discover and unlock new tiles, and complete quests to fill your world with life. And I describe this one as a mellow tile-placing village builder in which you slowly create an Arcadian landscape by matching water tiles to water and forest tiles to forest until your luck and your stack of tiles runs out. And this game arrived at the same time, roughly, as a couple of other games of the same ilk. They all came out together in a really interesting way. One of them was a game called Townscaper, which you might have seen. It was a browser game that also came out on Switch and elsewhere, in which you tap on the touchscreen to make buildings appear from the sea, and as you build them up, you can build spires, you can build large halls, and it's almost automatic how it happens, but you'll end up with little squares with benches and trees and walkways, and little bits of architecture, little features will appear as you pop out the height of these different buildings. The buildings will appear on stilts. You can chain them together. very relaxing, but it's an endless builder with no real aim to it. So it was like a fun toy with the game missing. And another game that came out around the same time was called Islanders. And that one was a bit more of a strategic kind of game where you had to reach certain targets to continue and move on to the next level and that kind of thing. But it didn't quite hit the way that I wanted it to hit. And so I was thinking when I saw Dorfromantik that maybe this is the one that can take that endless creative feeling that Townscaper has and that chill fascination with building, mix it with some of the more gamified elements that we saw in Islanders that didn't quite click there. And this one was the most likely of the three, as far as I could see it, to actually make a game out of the fun puzzle strategy, kind of tile dropping, creative building, fun and casual game. And I think that probably holds true just about. This one definitely has the clearest gameplay vision, I would say, beyond being like a fun sort of half hour and then you kind of forget about it, which I did with the other two. It was like play it for half an hour, a couple of days in a row. Dorfromantik has been the one that has stuck with me the longest. I've been playing this game for a couple of weeks now. I got an advance review copy, so thank you for that to the publisher. But it was under embargo, and also I felt like my appreciation of this one has been somewhat evolving over time. So I wanted to get a few more hours under my belt, and I think it's not the kind of game that you can really binge on, you know what I mean? It's like a game that you play in short bursts from day to day, and that you can get better at. Like there is definitely scope here for improving your strategy and for understanding the game better. So I think it is the game that has the strongest gameplay and the most longevity of those three. And the way that it works is you're looking down onto a hexagonal board, and there is one hexagon highlighted in the middle of the board, and you'll get a starter tile basically. Maybe it's a grassy tile, it usually is. And then you have a stack of tiles that are all little hexagonal tiles, all of which have different characteristics. For example, there are forest tiles that are all forest on all 6 edges. Maybe there's a rocky tile that has this geometric rock shapes, and they reach all 6 edges. You'll get villages or grassy tiles, but then you get mixed tiles, and that's where things get more complex. So perhaps a tile has forest on 2 edges, grass on 1 edge, a house on 1 edge, and then like a piece of rail or something like that. And so you have to slot these tiles together by matching edge to edge. So if you match grass to grass, then you'll get a white glowing line appears between the tiles, and you know that that's a successful link. You don't have to match every edge, but you get more points if you do. So it's beneficial to you to do so. There are other mechanics that encourage you to make correct matches as well. But as you can imagine, as your tile placing gets more complicated, there are more different configurations of specific spaces that there are to put your tiles. So maybe you end up with a space that has rock on 2 sides, trees on 1 side, and then like more rock or something like that, and some grass as well. And you just have to wait for that right Goldilocks tile to come out for you to get a perfect placement. So yeah, basically you get a stack. You can see the first tile on top of the stack. It's the only one that you can place. You have to place it. You really want to try and get matches for score. If you don't, it doesn't matter. You still get 20 points or 10 points, I think, if you completely mismatch a tile. And the landscape that you put down as you put these tiles next to each other evolves in a semi-automatic way. So if you put down lots of village tiles next to each other, they will cohere into a nice looking village. The same goes for a forest. If you put down loads of treed, wooded tiles next to each other, then a forest will sort of cohere out of what you're dropping. And you start to build like a pretty landscape. It's a super appealing game. It looks lovely. Like the drawings and the colours in the tiles are really nice. It has a lovely soundtrack, a lovely ambient soundtrack, just very, very mellow, very, very dreamy music. And the audio-visual presentation definitely gives it a very specific, mellow tone. It's really enjoyable. It's very easy to just get lost in playing this game, just quickly throwing down tiles and listening to the music and watching the landscape appear before your eyes. in a really nice, pleasant, unchallenging, relaxing kind of way. But that's first impressions, and there is more here than meets the eye. There is some challenge to this game. There are several modes that you can play in. The most fun one is just the basic mode, where you have a finite number of tiles, and in order to restock your stack of tiles, you have to complete some small in-game challenges. This means that, for example, if you drop a village tile that has a number floating above it, like let's say it has 15, that means you have to match other village tiles to it with a minimum of 15 houses in total. So you have to chain together village tiles. And when you reach that target, you'll hear a little ding. You'll see a little flash of how many points you just got for completing that quest. It's like 100 or something. And you'll get 5 tiles back into your stack. That's one of the ways to refresh your stack. There are others. If you have, for example, completed a really large forest, let's say you get a forest tile with 132 tree quest attached to it, that means you have to attach quite a lot of forest tiles to make that happen. Then you'll finish that reward and you'll get your 5 tiles. But then sometimes a little flag pops up on a forest or on a village. And what that means, if you close that forest, that means that if you seal it off so that you can no longer use it in further missions, then you'll get 5 more tiles into your stack as well. So there is an incentive to leave a forest open in case you get another forest mission that you can just plug into it and insta-solve because you already had a big forest there waiting. Or you can close it and get 5 tiles that way and some extra points. There is a third way to refresh your stack, and that is a perfect placement. That means that if you've managed to, for example, put together a space that has 6 grassy sides, and there is just like this hole there waiting for the perfect tile to come along, and then you get a grassy tile, pure grassy tile, and you drop it into that hole, it will be matching on every side. That's a perfect placement. You get a points bonus, and you get 1 tile back. So if you can create like a chain of perfect placements, then you're essentially getting free tiles. Every time you put one down, you get 1 back. So there are a bunch of different strategies that you can try out in this game. And I would say that at first I was playing pretty fast and just throwing down all my tiles, not quite understanding why I'd run out, because my scores were going up and I felt like I was doing well, but my stack wasn't replenishing as fast as I was burning through my tiles. And so I started to slow down a little, to pay a little more attention to my placements, to try and match edges where possible, and to hesitate for longer, and to really slow down and focus a little more on the gameplay. And I have managed to pretty much double my scores. I think I was getting 5,000 or 6,000 points in a normal round. Now it's closer to 10,000. I think my current record is like 11,000 or something like that. So the score is growing, the strategies are developing. But it's more strategic than you might first think. And I think that's for better and for worse. That's something that I'll come back to in a bit. But some of the other mechanics that are at play here is that sometimes you'll see ghost tiles, that is, a whited out tile that lies like far at the periphery of the landscape that you're creating. And if you can reach it by building in that direction, then you'll open up a challenge. If you can complete that challenge, for example, say it's a 20 rock challenge or a 10-part railway, then you will unlock rewards. And there are rewards that are part of a kind of a meta game that goes from run to run. Those rewards can be things like for passing 10,000 points, for creating a body of water that had 20 tiles in it, for making a giant forest, that kind of thing. And as you tick off those rewards, which can happen at any time during a run, then you will unlock new tiles. And that's really fun. It's really fun when you unlock a new tile. Some of the early ones that you get are things like windmills or boats that will sail up and down the rivers that you've created, or water wheels. And some of them are cosmetic variants on existing tiles. For example, instead of just green trees, you might get trees with cherry blossoms. So you get beautiful pink trees to make your landscape look even nicer. One of my favourites was snowy tiles or dark houses that have lights on rather than just daylight houses, that kind of thing. And so your landscapes get more pretty and more diverse. And as you complete more rewards just through continued play, really, it seems like all the rewards are pretty much naturally occurring in the course of gameplay. I don't think that I've ever targeted a reward. The tiles just kind of, the new tiles just sometimes ping and unlock. I've always been slightly surprised when they do, because it just happens at any stage in a game. You might fulfill the criteria of one of these rewards, even as you're playing your last tile, having backed yourself into a corner or something. So there are incentives to keep playing, even if they're a little arbitrary feeling in when they pop. But there are also several modes in this game. There is a quick mode where you just get a limited number of tiles. There is a monthly mode where you have to fill a small area trying to get the best possible score from a very concise, small hexagon. And then you go into a leaderboard, although I couldn't actually access the leaderboards on my Switch, unfortunately, because I got a couple of quite good scores and I wanted to see how I measured up. There is a hard mode where you get less tiles and less opportunities to refresh your stack. There is an endless mode with no scores, no perfect placements, and just a very large area to fill with an endless flow of tiles. And then there is a custom mode where you can tweak the parameters yourself. I've played with it a little bit, but I didn't feel that it made the game incredibly different, to be honest. It was like how often tree tiles might occur, how often challenges occur in your tile stack and that kind of thing. So you can make it a little easier, I guess. I mean, if you have more challenges, then you have more opportunities to refill your stack and that kind of thing. Railways tend to be the most troublesome of all of the different types of tiles, and so I guess if you turn down railways and turn up challenges, then you are essentially giving yourself a better chance. So there are lots of different modes that you can play here. There are reasons to keep on playing, and it does have a very lovely, soft feel to the whole thing. It's a very lovely audiovisual presentation. But I have had a couple of thoughts about this game, about the difficulty of strategy in this game. For example, I think most people, when they look at this game, will see a chill-out game. They'll see something they can relax with. You can just build. There's this kind of fantasy when you see a game like this, that you'll just be building and building and just making something wonderful and really falling into the screen in this relaxed state. And there is a little bit of that here in this game, but there is also, once you've played it for a couple of hours and you've started to realize that there are different strategies at play here, that there are different strategic options in building a giant forest or building 3 smaller forests that you can close off with the flags, that hesitating over where you put your tile for longer and really looking at every available space might mean that you get more perfect placements and refresh your stack. All of the strategies seem to involve higher focus and higher concentration, and I think that level of higher focus and concentration actually swim a little bit against that fantasy of just having a beautiful chill-out game. You realise that you're actually kind of sweating it a little bit, trying to not let your stack run down too far and keeping an eye on every tile, trying to keep memory of like, okay, so I remember that over here I had 3 trees and 3 grass, and so you're waiting for that tile to come to get that perfect placement, trying to memorize like unusual spots that you have that you would like to fill when the right tile comes along. And so you can end up pretty highly focused on this game, and it can end up being like quite a mixture of you trying to exercise or discover strategies. Like I think I've got 13 hours in the game over the last couple of weeks, usually played in like half-hour bursts. And if you're trying to exercise strategies, you're also a little bit at the mercy of the random stack that you're getting as well. And this leads to quite a strange sensation. I've had times when I have felt frustrated that my excellent seeming run was like unceremoniously came to an end because I just didn't get any challenge tiles for ages and wasn't able to refresh my stack, and my game was over. And then there have been other times when I was kind of quite confused about why the strategies that I seemed to be arriving at weren't working out for me. For example, the first thing that you will learn to do is to grow all of your tiles in different directions. Like you might want to grow out like a strand of village, grow out a strand of forest, have one waterway that goes out uninterrupted in another direction. So kind of like tendril shapes, so that you can group your tiles and fulfill those challenges as they come up. But then you realize that actually perfect placements are very valuable, because every time you make one, you are getting a free tile essentially, and a little score bump as well. But to get perfect placements, you really do have to mix it up a little bit. And so I haven't arrived at what I consider to be a strong strategy for this game, despite having played 13 hours of it. I'm just kind of meandering through it, trying to beat my last score, sometimes with success, sometimes without. And I'm not quite sure where I sit with Dorfromantik right now. I think it's a beautiful little thing. It's really nice looking. It's really nicely illustrated. The music is gorgeous. And I have had a really fun time with it, and I do think that it's addictive. I've also found it, as far as the gameplay goes, to be a little bit bewildering at times. There is definitely like a gamer part of me that wants to do well at the game, and isn't satisfied by, like a 20-minute run where you don't beat your score and nothing seemed to really happen. So it depends, I guess. If you're able to just kind of lean into the game and enjoy it for what it is, then I think it could be a really enjoyable time. If you like to achieve some level of mastery over it, or if you want to progress in the game, which is, to my surprise, I found myself wanting that in Dorfromantik. And I have ticked off, I think, 25 different challenges, achieved loads of rewards and gotten loads of fresh tiles and new biomes. But at the same time, my scores are sort of hovering around the 10,000 mark, and I'm kind of feeling a little frustrated that I can't find a winning strategy somehow. So it's an interesting one. It's relaxing until you start to focus on it, at which point it becomes less relaxing. So I'm not exactly sure what this game is yet. And I think maybe that's something that's just going to occur over time, is that I'll get a greater understanding of what Dorfromantik really is. Is it actually quite a deep strategy game that just is a little opaque at first? Or is it more of a toy that is meant to be played in short bursts, and that's just kind of how it is? I'm not quite sure yet. I'm enjoying my time with it, and maybe my appreciation and understanding of it will grow as my strategies improve, or maybe I'll just find that I'm plateauing and tail off it. I'm not quite sure. But it's certainly a very mellow time, and I think that most people will be able to find some kind of enjoyment in this game. That's Dorfromantik. So that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a bit of an indie roundup this time, and I guess I wasn't particularly glowing in my praise for any of those games. I definitely had a hard time with Tunic. I had a mixed response to Hindsight, and I'm still figuring out really what my take on Dorfromantik is. If I had to score it now, I think I would give it a 7 or something, but there have been moments at which I felt like it might have been an 8 or a 6, depending on how well things were going and what my perception of the game was at any given point. There have been times when I first started where I couldn't see the strategy, and I just thought, okay, so you just group together different tiles. And then later, realizing that the perfect placements matter, realizing that the flags matter, it does seem like there are more layers here, and I'm kind of trying to orientate myself within them. It was also really fun to talk about Birth. I'm really looking forward to that game. That demo is available on Steam now if you want to try it. I would love to hear from you if you've got Dorfromantik strategies that you want to offer me, if you've got Tunic takes that you'd like to deliver to me, or if you've played Birth or any other games at the Steam Next Fest. I would love to hear what you're playing, especially to take some recommendations. So you can reach out to me on Twitter at Gaming in the Wild. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, pretty much everywhere. It's Gaming in the Wild, including, Steam and all of the other places. So you can find me. Please do let me know what you've been playing, if you've been playing games at the Steam Next Fest. And if you've gotten this far in the show, then please do consider becoming a supporter. You can do so at patreon.com/gaminginthewild. It's also very helpful if people drop star ratings on Spotify or leave reviews and ratings on the Apple Podcast app. That helps more people to find the show, helps this show rise up the algorithm and find more listeners and that kind of thing, which is really gratifying to see. So thanks to everyone that's been leaving reviews and star ratings for the show. I see them and I appreciate them. I'll be back next week. I've got like a whole bunch of games that I'm playing right now. I'm also playing a game called Four Tales, a really interesting narrative-driven card game. I've been playing Rollerdrome, a game that got a lot of buzz when it popped out. The kind of, what would you call it? It's like a shoot-'em-up roller skating game where you roll around a skate rink in a kind of Running Man, Hunger Games type violent sport. And I've also been playing Bowser's Fury. I finished Mario 3D World the other day. So I've been playing Bowser's Fury and I'm having lots of fun with that. And I will talk about that at some point too. So maybe it'll be one of those games next week. I hope that you come along again and I hope that you enjoyed this show. Take care of yourselves and each other. Thanks for listening and bye-bye for now.